Welcome to the Jeff Knows Inc. Entrepreneurial Show with your host, Jeff Lopes.
We're live on the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. Super excited to have on today Jimmy Farris. What is up, brother?
Not much, man. I'm just enjoying a beautiful day here in Boise, Idaho, and happy to be on the podcast with you today.
We're going to have a fun conversation. Let's start off right off the bat. I want to hear your story because, making it to that level as an athlete, it takes a lot of dedication, a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of family support. Let's start off with you. What was your first initial interaction with football? And let's take the story from there, because I think there's lots of little nuggets we get in there.
Yeah. So my first real interaction or introduction to football was watching NFL games on TV with my dad and my oldest brother. So my dad grew up in California, was an all-state high school football player in California, went to San Jose State on a football scholarship. And then my oldest brother was playing for the junior high and high school when I was a kid. And so grew up around that. And I remember vividly when I started watching football on TV, just loving it. There was not one thing that stood out that said, oh, I like it because of this. Something about the helmets and the shoulder pads and the competition and all of that. I just fell in love with it. And so started playing flag football when I was in third grade. In the town in Idaho, Lewiston, Idaho, where I grew up, there was no tackle football. So I played flag football all the way up until 8th grade, believe it or not. I wasn't big enough weight-wise to make the 7th grade team. You had to weigh 120 pounds, and I weighed right around 100. And so I didn't play football in 7th grade. And then in 8th grade, I started playing tackle football and was way undersized, not a great athlete. And when I got to high school, I just started working, decided that I wanted to be an all-state football player, get a college scholarship, and ultimately try to go to the pros. And that seemed like a long shot. I didn't know what that would take. I didn't know if it was even possible, but just knew that it was something that I wanted to do. It's actually a goal I set when I was 10 years old to be a professional football player. I wrote that down on a goal sheet in my 5th grade class. And, like I said, didn't know what that would take. Didn't even know what it looked like to work hard and be dedicated. I just followed what I saw other people doing, things that I read in books. I remember reading Bo Jackson's book and Magic Johnson's book and taking some of the things that they said they were doing when they were kids to try to become better and be better athletes, and ultimately got a college scholarship to University of Montana, became an All-American there. And then I went undrafted out of college, signed an undrafted free agent contract with the 49ers, ended up with the Patriots towards the end of that year, won a Super Bowl with the Patriots, and then spent 6 more years with the Atlanta Falcons and now Washington Commanders, and then retired officially in 2009. So that's kind of a truncated timeline, so to speak, left out a lot of details, but that's the gist of it.
What positions did you play?
So I was a wide receiver and played on all the special teams. So kickoff returns, kickoff coverage, punt return, punt coverage.
So when you're in high school, I'm just going to assume Idaho is massive for football.
Depends on who you ask. At that time, we didn't put a lot of college football players out. Certainly
you
not
didn't,
a lot of pro players. No, not at all. It wasn't a state known for putting out big time college players or certainly not any professional players. And so that's kind of what I was referring to. I didn't have any examples of guys that I could say, well, so-and-so made it, so I can follow in their footsteps, or being able to look at somebody and say, well, that guy made it, so now I believe it's possible for me. I just didn't have that growing up in the small town where I was.
You always hear athletes and you always hear people say, and there's so much controversy behind when somebody says, I don't have a plan B. And then you'll hear a lot of people say, you always need a plan B.
Yeah.
Where was your mindset? Did you have a plan B, or was just like, this is what I'm doing, that's it?
It's funny you bring that up. A huge piece of one of the things I talk about in my book, and a huge piece in all of my seminars and training, is that idea of no plan B.
Okay.
I have believed since the time I was very young that if you want to do something, you go for what you want and you do that until you either get it and it works out, or it reaches a point where it's not sustainable, not feasible. And at that point, you just fall forward into a new plan A. And some people might think that's just semantics. But for me, it really shapes a mindset that says, I'm all in. I'm not gonna deviate my attention or my focus or my effort towards anything other than what I'm doing. And if it doesn't work out, then I'll just move on to a new plan A. I just think so many people can get themselves distracted by thinking about, well, what's the fallback plan? Yeah. And it also gives you a little bit of an out. It takes you out of that back against the wall, got to make this happen mentality. And I saw so many guys when I got into the pros, for instance, that obviously made it to that level and then started to try to do all kinds of other things, start a clothing company or a record label or a business, something that they could fall back on when their career was over. And while I think there's a lot of sense in that, right? Because a lot of guys retire and don't have anything to move on to. What I found was that a lot of times those guys didn't last very long because so much of their focus was on setting up the fallback plan or the next thing or the plan B, that it took their focus away from plan A, what they're doing. And when you're operating at that level, the pro level or the elite levels in business, you have to have a singular focus on what the goal is at hand, what you're trying to do at that time, or you're going to fall into average, mediocre performance.
I love it. I've been an entrepreneur for 26 and a half years. And I 1,000% agree with everything you're saying. It's just that mindset, right? That laser focus to get what you want to, and not be scared to put the extra work in when people are not. So I love that. And you, as you're saying with other athletes, when they start doing that, they start seeing income come through their, and I'm a strong believer as an athlete, we'll talk about that after, when you get to a certain peak as a pro, you want to be able to take that time and brand yourself. So I think that's very important, the branding aspect, the branding aspect leads to so many other different opportunities and ventures. But I do agree that they become very comfortable and they become complacent in the mindset of, like you said, you have a backup plan if this doesn't work out. So their effort is not always 100% focused. It's not like they got to do this to put food on the table anymore, right? So I love that you have that mindset. When you didn't get drafted, how was your mindset? Let's talk about that, because you hear a lot of pro athletes. I'm a huge baseball guy. And I'm heavily involved in the baseball world here. Like I'm part of a board, and you hear a lot of really elite, especially now in Canada, a lot of athletes or a lot of these young baseball players are getting scholarships, or a lot of them are getting drafted. And you hear a lot of them in that mindset where it's like they're that draft day and the first round comes, second round comes, third round, and they don't get drafted. Where was your mindset that day, and did you think you were going to get picked?
Yeah. So going into the draft, big picture, the mindset was, I don't care when I get drafted, where I get drafted, where I end up. I just want to be in a camp wearing a helmet come next week, right? And what I mean by that is most teams, the weekend after the draft, will hold the first mini camp where they bring in all the new guys, mix them with some of the veteran players. So it's kind of their first opportunity to get a look at the guys that they draft or the guys that they sign. And it's your first opportunity to make an impression. And so for me, I didn't care where that was. I just wanted a helmet and a jersey and an opportunity. Yeah. And so in line with another thing that's huge for me, which is expectation, right? I'm a huge expectations guy. I expected to get drafted. I had every expectation that what I'd done in college and what I'd done my senior year, what I'd done in my pro day workouts would lead to me getting drafted. When that didn't happen, sure, there was a little bit of disappointment, but the focus immediately shifted to, okay, I just need to get signed as a free agent. So that now became the new expectation. I expect to sign as a free agent. And I got a call from the 49ers, and 5 minutes later, we'd agreed to a contract, and they FedExed it. The next day I signed it.
So it was that quick, right? It was the draft date. Is that right? Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So during the 7th round of the draft, which is the last round, get towards, those last 10 or 15 picks, teams started calling and said, hey, if you don't get picked in these next 10 picks, we'd like to sign you as a free agent. Is essentially how that works. So I started to get some of those calls. Remember talking to the 49ers and to the New York Giants, which was a favorite team of mine growing up. I was a huge Lawrence Taylor fan. Yeah. And ultimately the 49ers called back first. I remember talking to my dad, and I said, I got the Giants and the 49ers that both said they want to sign me. What should I do? And we talked about it and decided that whoever calls back first, we're going to go with them. And so the 49ers called, and I said, yep, want to be a 49er. And a week later, I was in Santa Clara, California at minicamp with the Niners. And like I said, I expected to get drafted, didn't care where. When I didn't get drafted, the expectation or the new plan A became sign as a free agent. And that happened, and I never looked back.
First day at that open mini camp, how did you feel? Like, give me a little rundown of that day. It's just like you're living your childhood dream all of a sudden, right? 10 years old, you write it in the book, you're on the field now. Give me that day, run it by us.
So many emotions that day. So it's this conflict between I made it, right? I accomplished the goal that I set. I'm here. And part of me had a chip on my shoulder that was, I'm here to prove these guys wrong for not drafting me. They should have drafted me. They didn't think I was good enough to draft. Yeah, they signed me, but I'm going to prove them wrong, that I'm good enough to be here, that I'm ready to go. So I was dealing with kind of that conflict of saying, man, I'm happy to be here. Goal accomplished, goal achieved. And you know what? I got a chip on my shoulder and I'm going to prove these guys wrong. And I went in there my first day and basically flopped, fell flat on my face to some degree. I had a horrible session in a special teams drill as a punt returner. And that was really important to me because they already had a handful of great wide receivers, Terrell Owens being one of them. He was at the time probably the best receiver in the NFL. He's in the Hall of Fame now. But I knew I wasn't going in there to be the next Jerry Rice. I wasn't going to be a starting receiver right off the bat. And so I knew that I needed to prove that I could play well on special teams and particularly be a punt returner. And I totally blew it. And that day, failing and flopping in that drill helped me realize I really need to shift this mindset, this attitude that I have, that I'm here to prove these guys wrong and I'm good enough to be here and I belong here too. I need to get a lot better, and achieving the goal of getting here. That was just the beginning. That's not the end. That's just the beginning. Now the real work begins. If you want to stay here, you want to have a career in the NFL, you want to be a 49er, better humble yourself. Look around and see all the resources that you have, all the people that you can look to and learn from and use to get better. And that all happened, luckily for me, on that first day.
That's, I think it's amazing. You came to the realization very quickly with that. But I'm a strong believer that sometimes that chip on your shoulder is a positive thing too. I mean, I'll give you an example. Yes. There's an athlete. He's actually used to play for the Toronto Blue Jays. Now he plays for the Cubs. He's a pitcher, Marcus Stroman. And for a pitcher, most pitchers are 6'1", 6'2", 6'3". He's like 5'8". And everybody, no one even gave him a chance. And he was always good enough that no one ever gave him a chance because of his height. And he actually has a tattoo of a casino chip on his shoulder, which I absolutely love, right? His attitude, his cockiness got him to where he is. So I'm a strong believer too that little chip sometimes is not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you have to be arrogant, but that little chip keeps you hungry always, right? You're always there to prove something, which I love. So going forward, were you on, did you automatically start playing? Were you on the practice squad? Like, how does that whole work? How does the whole, because it's so crazy when you look at football, like you went from possibly being drafted to signing to being on the field in a camp within a week period. If you're in the baseball major league, you're getting drafted. You're going to single A, high A, double A, triple A. I was actually just talking to somebody the other day, and he's related to a pitcher for the Mets, and he got drafted in 2014 and just made his major league debut. Yes. And it's like, that's a 7-8 year period of the minors making $1,200 a month, living in hotels, riding buses. It's a little different with NFL, right? There's no there's no minors really. There's either you're playing or you're not, right? Unless you do arena ball or something like that, but that's not really where you want to be, right? So how when you're there, and they obviously they carry these big practice squads, did you automatically make the starting squad a practice? Like, how does that all work? Because obviously you just came from pretty much signing, right? Yep.
So you make a couple great points. In the NFL, it's basically the varsity or nothing, right? Yeah. There's 53 roster spots. And if you're going to be on the team and be a part of the organization, you got to be one of those 53 to be suiting up on game day, and playing in the games.
Does that 53 include the practice squad? Is that all one number?
No. So the next level is, at that time, they kept 5 guys on the practice squad. The NFL allowed you to have five guys on the practice squad. So now I think they've expanded it to like 10 or 12 guys, which is great. It gives more guys an opportunity to kind of showcase their abilities. But back then, you were either on the 53, and if you were lucky, you got a spot on the practice squad. And so what happened with me is I came into that camp number 11 out of 11 receivers on the depth chart, truly. And we were going to keep 5. And so there was, 5 or 6 guys ahead of me. Yeah. And some of these guys had come from SEC schools. They'd been productive in the SEC. And so immediately I was like, I'm way behind the 8 ball. And ultimately I was able to work myself up right before training camp started. Through the mini camps and the OTAs, I was able to work myself up to number 6. And I remember when we came into training camp, I was the 3rd string X receiver. Okay. So most teams will have an X and a Z receiver. And I was the 3rd string X receiver going into that first day of training camp. On the afternoon practice of the first day of training camp, the starting X receiver, a guy named JJ Stokes, pulls his hamstring. Okay. So I'm now up to number 2. So when they call, hey, number 2 offense, I'm running with the 2s. Yeah. The very next morning, the second day of training camp, the backup receiver, Ty Streets, this guy from University of Michigan, great player, pulls his hamstring. So in the second practice of my second day of mini camp in the NFL, they call starting offense, first team offense. I'm the number 1 X receiver. Terrell Owens is the number 1 Z receiver. So I got thrown into that position immediately. And what I remember about that is, at that time of my life, and something that I still carry today, was I had this almost insecurity that fostered this incredible preparation, this need to be extremely prepared. I felt like, hey, never know when you're going to get your opportunity. I want to be prepared when that happens. I'm not going to have the time to get ready or get prepared. And so what I did over the summer was made sure that I knew the playbook inside and out, and I knew it from every position, not just X, not just Z. I knew every position in the playbook. And so when I got thrown into the starting lineup, essentially, I was ready to go. I knew what I was supposed to be doing. I knew my assignments. And as I played more and started catching passes and getting involved, and my confidence started to grow, ended up starting all 4 preseason games that year. So my first ever NFL game was our first preseason game. We played at San Diego against the then San Diego Chargers. And I started that game alongside Terrell Owens. And that all happened because I really focused on my preparation, being ready when the opportunity presented itself. And when it did, I was ready to take advantage of it. I didn't make any mistakes. I played really well. I did what I was supposed to do. And ultimately, I got cut from the 53-man roster on that final cut down day, and then signed back to the practice squad. And then I spent several months that season with the 49ers on their practice squad. And really what that means is you practice every day. You're a part of the team. You just don't play in the games. You don't get to suit up and play in the games. So that was kind of the journey for me, right? Was coming in undrafted, lowest guy on the totem pole. And just through that preparation, I was able to elevate up to number 6. And then through a couple injuries, I got up to basically the number 2 spot right behind Terrell Owens. And then when Ty and JJ came back from injury, then it bumped me back down. But I got an incredible opportunity to play, and I was ready to take advantage of it.
There's a huge lesson. And we talk about this on the podcast a lot, just with other guests, is the preparation, like putting yourself in that situation. Doesn't matter what it is, business, sports, whatever it is, putting yourself in that situation where that mindset, if you've been in that situation, you've replayed it in your head so many times. Yes. So when you're there, it's so important, and you can utilize that towards anything in life. So I love that you said that, right?
Yeah. Here's a point I want to make about that, because obviously, like, I'm a nut for preparation.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things people miss is that, I work with a lot of people in business and, all the way from employees to executive level. And I hear people a lot of times say things like, well, once I get that promotion, then I will fill in the blank. Once they start paying me $20 an hour, then I will.
Yeah.
And the key is that I had a conversation with a guy at the gym years ago, and he was talking about NFL free agency. And we were talking about some of the contracts that teams had given some guys. And he said, I can't believe the money they're giving some of these guys. And he brought up one player specifically, and he said, man, they paid him all that money, $20 million a year. Now he's got to go out and prove that he's worth it. Now he's got to go earn it. And I said, no, he already did that. That's why they paid him the money. They already saw him as a $20 million a year player. That's why they gave him $20 million a year. And so to kind of connect the dots on that, you don't get to wait until they make you the boss to start being a boss. You don't get to wait until they start paying you $20 an hour to start doing the things that somebody making $20 an hour. In fact, you won't get that promotion, or you won't get there until you prove that you're already that person. And that's where the preparation becomes so important, right? They'll make you the boss, or they'll put you in a position of leadership when they see that you're already a leader. They'll pay you the $20 million a year or the $20 an hour when they say that person is working at the level of 20 an hour or 20 million a year. And that all comes through the preparation, right? And so the reason why I was able to move up to number 6 and then ultimately number 2 was because when they looked at what I was doing in practice, they said, hey, this guy's ready to be a number 6 receiver. This guy's ready to be a number 2. He's not making any mistakes. He's productive. He's catching every ball thrown to him. He's practicing hard. When they saw that, then they moved me up. They didn't say, hey, well, we're gonna throw him in the spot and hope that it works out. They don't do that in life and business. Very rarely do you get thrown in and somebody just says, we'll see, right? You're going to get the promotion when they say that person is a supervisor. Let's move him into that position. That person's a CEO. Let's move him or her into that position. Yeah. That's how that works.
Yeah. Preparation. And then, I mean, it's just, I mean, there's luck involved too. I mean, there's always opportunity comes, but you have to be ready for the opportunity. A lot of what you're mentioning has to do with reframing, right? You're reframing a lot
100%.
of how you interact or how you digest everything that you're intaking and how you put it out towards the world. How do you talk to yourself? There's a lot of reframing there, which is something I'm a strong believer in. And it's something I go about teaching. Like I do this all the time, even dads that I work with a lot of dads. And it's like, a lot of dads will turn around like, oh, I got to go pick up my kids. No, you get to go pick up your kids. I got to go home for dinner. I get to go home for dinner. It's the simple reframing and understanding of the opportunity, not the negative aspect of it. So I love a lot of what you're saying. I'm clicking and seeing the reframing there. So I love that. So that whole season, did you have the opportunity to get off the practice squad and actually play, or how did that work?
So that didn't happen until the New England Patriots had some injuries at wide receiver. They ended up suspending a guy and called my agent and said, hey, we'd like to sign Jimmy to our active roster. Does he want to be a Patriot? And of course, I jumped on that opportunity because that whole season on the practice squad, I'd been working to try to get elevated up to the 49ers active roster. And when that didn't happen, I took that opportunity to do that with the Patriots. And obviously, it worked out really well. It ended up in being a part of that Super Bowl team with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, and kind of the beginning of the Patriots dynasty, kind of the beginning of the Patriot way, so to speak. But I won't say that it was all just roses, right? I was really frustrated for a number of months on the 49ers practice squad. I was going out every day and still telling myself, hey, you got to prepare as though you're going to start this week, because again, at any point in time, one of our receivers gets injured, boom, I'm bumped up and I'm playing. Yeah. And so even though I was on the practice squad, I was still preparing like I was a starter, like I was going to play in the game, because I knew that if I got that opportunity, I'd have one chance. I'd have one chance. And if I went out there and laid an egg, I'd probably never get that chance. And so ultimately that didn't happen with the Niners, but based on what I'd done in the preseason, the Patriots coaches and front office people liked me enough to give me a chance and sign me to their active roster.
So when you signed, were you still under contract with the 49ers, or were you traded, or were you released? Like, how does that all work, the transfer?
Yeah. So the way that works in the NFL is when you're on a practice squad, you're available to be promoted by that team or any other team.
Oh, that's awesome.
So if you're on the active roster, then you're locked in to a contract with that team. But when you're on the practice squad, they give you that flexibility to say, hey, I'm going to end my contract, my practice squad contract with the 49ers, and I'm going to sign an active roster contract with another team. And so that's what I did. That was my goal all season, was either get activated by the 49ers or some other team that saw me in the preseason and liked what they saw.
I'm just going to ask one quick question, and it's obviously off topic, but Tom Brady mindset, like how was it working with him? And obviously you're playing on the other end, like you're as a receiver. So how was it working with him, watching him? And you said this was essentially the beginning of the run, right?
Yes, this was the first season that he really played. So Drew Bledsoe had gotten hurt earlier that year, and Brady stepped in, and kind of the rest is history, right? But one of the things I noticed about Tom right away during that first season, and then that off season, heading into the 2002 season, which would be Tom's first real season as a starting quarterback, is he had a singular focus around what he was doing, right? So imagine this guy comes out of nowhere, wins a Super Bowl, and now he's one of the biggest sports stars in the world, right? He's judging the Miss America pageant. He's on Jay Leno and all the talk shows. He's got every supermodel in the world, ringing up his agent, trying to get a date with him. He had every opportunity to say, man, I worked for this, and I'm going to enjoy the fruits of my labor. Tom came back in March, and we started our offseason program like the second week of March, and Tom Brady was there at 7 a.m. in the weight room, working out, over in the indoor facility, working on his mechanics. Tom had a singular focus, that idea of keeping the main thing. And he's, as I've watched him through the years, he's carried that on. Tom Brady's a quarterback, and he never let the main thing get chipped away at by all the other stuff, right? Going back to what we originally talked about, that plan A, that singular focus. Now, sure, in the last number of years, he's got, the TB12 brand and some other things. He's branded himself, and he's capitalizing on that. But Tom Brady's never forgotten that what made all this possible was Tom Brady, the football player, the quarterback. And that was one of those things that I remember when I left the Patriots. They cut me, and then I ended up signing with the Falcons. That no matter what happens, keep the main thing, and never get, let your focus get fractured, let it get splintered. At the end of the day, what makes everything in my life possible, the cars and the house and all the cool stuff, is that I'm a football player. Yeah. So I gotta make sure I'm focused on that. And that's one of the secrets to all of Tom Brady's success, is that everything he's got going on, the singular focus is I'm a football player.
It's amazing to see. And amazing to see at this age, he's still, the guy's in insane shape still. Like, I was watching a workout video with him the other day. I was just like in awe about it. Yeah. So now you signed next. So your third season in the NFL. What team were you with now?
Falcons, Atlanta Falcons.
And that's where you finished off your career, right?
Well, so I played 3 years for the Falcons, then actually finished my career with the then Washington Redskins, now Washington Commanders. Yeah. And so
were you starting for the Falcons those 3 years?
So I was never a starter. I was in 2003, I was a third receiver. So I was playing about 20, 25 plays a game at receiver. Yeah. And then,
so you were quite active still.
Yeah. I was that third season is when I really started to, make my mark, so to speak. I was a starter, a captain on the special teams. I was a third receiver, ended up being special teams MVP of the team that year. And so I really started to kind of prove my value as a backup wide receiver and a core special teams guy. that third year with the Falcons. And that was a crazy year. We had come off of, in 2002, we went up to Green Bay and we're the first team in NFL history to beat the Packers at home in a playoff game. Yeah. Mike Vick, who was a young superstar at the time, kind of the beginning of him taking over the league as the kind of the face of the league. So coming into that 2003 season, we had a ton of expectations. Mike breaks his leg the second preseason game. And so that season ended up being a wreck. Yeah. So tons of learning in that season about
a lot of up and downs,
overcoming adversity. Facing challenges, performing under pressure. I mean, and it's, just a small slice of why I'm so thankful for my career as an athlete and everything that taught me about life and overcoming adversity and, handling uncertainty and disappointments. And that year kind of encapsulated all those things.
So when you went to Washington, that was your last, you did one season in Washington?
I did parts of 3 seasons in Washington, 5, 6, and 7.
So from start to end, how long was your career?
7 years. Rookie in 01. My last season was 08. I retired in 09.
When it was time to retire, how much of a mental battle was it to say, I'm like, as an athlete, I'm sure it's almost impossible to say that you don't have enough in your tank anymore. You want to give it one more shot or one more opportunity because, once you walk away, it's so hard to come back.
Yeah.
How did you struggle mentally, or did you struggle mentally to say, okay, this has to be my last year? Was it injury? Like what kind of pushed you away from it?
So for me, and like a lot of pro athletes that were in my position, it wasn't really our choice to step away and retire. The league or the team or the sport kind of makes that decision for you. Right. Yeah. And so I turned 30. And
which is crazy, still so young.
I know, but old by pro sports standards. Particularly in the NFL, if you're not a Pro Bowler or a starter at least, by the time you're 30, like they're looking to replace you with a 21-year-old that they can pay a third of what they have to pay you. Somebody that has a lot of upside potential. Somebody they feel like they can mold and groom into what they want. And with me, it was like, we know what this guy is. He's a good player, but we can probably keep a rookie for, like I said, a third of the salary and develop this guy. And so I spent about a year. I spent the entire 2009 season into 2008, 2009, still trying to get signed, still hoping that, some team that had some injuries that needed a guy to come in and play right away. So it took me about a year to really fully let go and fully admit that my career was over and that it wasn't going to happen anymore. And, to answer your question, literally all I'd done as a teenager and as an adult was football, was work to be a pro athlete and more specifically a football player. And I didn't know who I was if that wasn't a part of my life. I push back when people use things like, well, whatever it is, it's not who you are, it's just what you do. Right. And I think, not to be condescending or direct, but I think that's something you would hear more average, mediocre people or performers say, because when you talk to top level, elite level performers in any industry, but particularly pro sports, they identify with what they're doing.
100%.
I am an athlete.
Yeah.
I am a football player, a basketball player. It becomes a part of who you are. And the reason why that's important is because that informs every other decision in your life, right? So my decisions not to drink alcohol or smoke weed or do any drugs or eat fast food or stay out late and party all night. When those things would come up, I'd say, no, I don't do that because I am a pro athlete. And when that was no longer the case, now I'm faced with having to question why I'm doing anything. right? Why am I going to the gym? Well, I used to say, well, because I'm a pro athlete. Like, I got to be in shape. I got to get better. Now I'm going to the gym. Like, why am I even doing this? Now I'm trying to get up earlier, thinking about, the discipline and the commitment. I'm like, for what?
Yeah.
Who am I if I'm not working towards making a team or being an athlete? What do I care about? What am I interested in? What do I have to offer the world? What value can I add? Do I have any? Or am I just a dumb jock, a guy that was good to run down and cover a kickoff? But what do I do now? I spent my whole 20s playing football. I don't have any experience. I don't have a resume. I struggled mightily with that for several years. And, I tell some of those stories in my book about how I ultimately got back on track and overcame that. But that identity crisis is a monster. And, one of the things I do now is I work with people who are going through a transition. Maybe they were at one point a C-suite level executive or CEO of a company. And now they're out of that and they're thinking the same thing. Who am I if I'm not, John Smith, the CEO of, or whatever? And it's a rough transition.
It's a very rough transition. And the identity, I mean, I've talked to a ton of athletes on this podcast. I mean, I actually become good friends with Brad Johnson, NFL Hall of Famer quarterback. I mean, just guys like that. They all go through it. The identity, especially even guys like to have really short careers, like UFC fighters.
Yes.
I mean, I had Chad Mendes on and he struggled with it. And now he's actually, after a few years, now he's back doing bare knuckle because he needed that almost that purpose. And it's so crazy when you hear that identity. And it goes by, you had the opportunity to play in the NFL. There's a lot of guys that get to the college level, where there's football, baseball, whatever the sport is, and it ends there. And and they don't know nothing else. Since 4 years old, that is all they have done. That is all they have focused on. That is all their parents have done, is put money, time, effort, especially like I'm coming from Canada, hockey. I mean, you get kids there.
Yes.
That's all they do. They have coaches for shooting, coaches for skating, coaches for speed, coaches for work. And they get to 16, 17, they draft in the OHL, and then they never get drafted in NHL, and they're stuck at 17, 18, not knowing what to do. And you think about that as if, they still got their whole life ahead of them, their whole careers, but it's just that identity just locks in, and that depression, that anxiety of like, who am I now? It's so real, right? And every time you talk to athletes, unless you've had this incredibly long pro career and you're ready to step aside, it's I would say majority of the people went through or go through what you went through, right? When you look at everything now, when you sit back and kind of like almost take everything like you're looking into a globe now, and take a step back, and would there be anything you would have changed?
The only thing I would have changed is, and again, only in hindsight.
Yeah.
Can I look back and
course,
say,
this is,
you know what
100%.
I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's the crazy part about it, because I can sit here now and say, yeah, I would have done X, Y, and Z. But for me, that change would be cutting that NFL career when it was over, just being able to say, you know what, this is over. You've got to move on. And again, that's only in hindsight that I can say that. I spent 3.5 years remembering the past, kind of nostalgia, thinking, man, life was so great then, and I was doing what I loved, and now I'm not, feeling sorry for myself.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time in the past.
Victim mentality.
Absolutely. Man, why couldn't I have had a Pro Bowl career? Why couldn't I have made $10 million, $20 million? Why couldn't I spent so much time almost comparing myself to these other guys that I play with, and said, why couldn't I have had a career like that? Why couldn't I have done that? Then when I got over that, I spent a lot of time playing the victim. Well, I wasted 10 years of my life, all of my 20s, playing college and pro football. Now I guess I'm, just stuck here with no skills, no ability. So I went through that whole thing. Yeah. And then I went through, what? Maybe that was my one shining moment. And maybe now the rest of my life, I'm just going to be an average guy. Maybe I'll just find some job and never really strive to climb another mountain again, because I don't know if I got it. I don't, maybe it was all a fluke. You go through all of these.
It's so crazy. It sounds like it's like you're going through different stages of grieving almost, which is crazy.
Absolutely.
As you're saying that, I'm just like, it's just, obviously you could describe them in different ways, but it's just different forms of grieving. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And the biggest one was, I felt like I'd put in my time. I'd sacrificed my teens and my 20s and all the work, all that I put in my time. And so now opportunities should just be coming my way, right? Yeah. People should be offering me up the job at ESPN as a commentator, or the job in, the C-suite level of their company, because I'm a pro. I thought that I should have all these opportunities just waiting for me. And it wasn't until I realized, like, dude, if you want to ever do anything again, you better uncover that guy, that mindset that got you that Super Bowl, that got you those 7-8 years in the NFL. You better remember who that guy was, dust off all of those tools, and then apply it to whatever the next thing is that you want to do. Because as hard as it was to climb that mountain, it's going to be just as hard to climb the next one. But remember, you've got all the tools. You've got all the tools. And that was the key for me, because the mistake that I made, Jeff, kind of back to the identity thing, when I realized my NFL career was over, it's like, I'm no longer going to be able to say, yeah, I'm Jimmy Farris, pro athlete, or Jimmy Farris, wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons. I said, well, you know what? I need to totally divorce myself from that identity, almost like you do in a relationship, right? You gotta cut it off and move forward. Yeah. And what I did with that was I threw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. So when I divorced the identity, I threw out the guy who was the disciplined, hardworking, committed. Yeah. I threw all that out.
Trying to start fresh.
It was yes. Yep. I tried to build a new house, so to speak, just build a new house from the ground up. And what I realized is that I could let go of the identity of a pro athlete, let go of the identity with a football player, but remember that the true me, the thing that made that possible was the disciplined, committed, obsessed, hardworking, resilient, gritty dude. You had those tools.
Oh, you had built a foundation already, and it was there. It was solid. Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Yes.
Quick question. This is pure off topic. As a specialty, playing all the specialty teams and all that, you probably learned a lot more the ins and outs of the game than most athletes. Has coaching ever crossed your mind?
No, I never. Funny you asked that, because that's been a persistent question.
It is. Okay.
Yeah. Which is great. I don't love football on that level. I don't love the X's and O's of football. I don't love the game from a truly strategic level, right? Yeah. I'm into the strategy of it. I'm into play calling, and I like that. But I never wanted to waste 1 ounce of my life spending 18 hours in a coach's office, worrying about how we're going to convert on third down, or
high stress jobs.
Man, I watched so many of the coaches that I loved and respected that I played for. Yeah. That would go months without any quality time with their wife or their kids.
Oh, and 100%.
They're leaving the office at 3 a.m., going home, sleeping till 5 or 6, getting up and being back at the office by 7. Yeah, I did not want to sacrifice that for football anymore. Yeah. And so what I did, because I love to coach, is transition that over to what I'm doing now, which is coaching the mindset, habits, practices, principles of elite level performers, coaching business people on how they can implement that. And so I still get to kind of scratch that itch to coach and give back some of the knowledge that I learned over those years. I just do it now in a business professional setting versus in a sports setting.
What do you do competitive wise for yourself now? I mean, why ask that? I mean, when you have that drive, whether it's golf or there's always that itch just to compete. Is there anything you do right now?
Boxing.
We do
boxing, which is funny. I spent how many years getting my head knocked around, 6, 7 concussions, and the sport of choice that I transitioned into was boxing.
Okay. That's interesting. Do you know what my full-time business is?
Your full-time business?
Yeah. For 16 plus years, I started a company January 2006. So 2006, January 20th. It's called Kimura Wear, where we manufacture, design boxing and martial art equipment. And I've been doing that. So I'll when we get off the air, I'll take your number and I'll send you some stuff. But that's what I do. We have 130 something products. We deal with about 1,800 gyms. We've been doing this for 16 plus years. Yeah. So we design, we manufacture everything from the start, all the equipment.
That's incredible. So, boxing, the martial arts in general, but boxing was one of my first loves. I mean, truly.
It was, huh? Interesting.
Oh yeah. Along with watching NFL and college games when I was a kid. I remember 1985. So I would have been 6 or 7 seeing my first Mike Tyson fight. He fought Jose Revolta. I'll never forget it. And falling in love with boxing and watching Sugar Ray Leonard was still in the game at that time. I remember watching his fight with Hagler and watching Tommy Hearns toward the end of his career. If there would have been a boxing gym in Lewis and Idaho at the time, you would have turned pro boxer. It may have been a competition. Truly, I know that sounds crazy, but through college and through the pros, I always used boxing training just as a way to stay great cross training, great core, great agility. Yeah, 100%. Great. Yeah. It's crazy as a lot of the sports teams now, the younger generations they use martial arts or boxing as a cross training in their sport, especially baseball. I mean, it's all core, it's all twists, it's all spins. Yeah. I mean, it relates a lot to swinging a bat, right? So I love that. How often do you train? So I train 3 days a week on the pads, on a heavy bag. It's been since I moved back here to Idaho. I haven't sparred much. I had a gym in Atlanta where a guy named Burt Wells, amazing coaches a ton of amateur fighters, a few pro fighters. He trained me and coached me. And we had guys like Evan Holyfield, who's Evander Holyfield's son. Trained there. Evander would come by the gym every so often. And so I got still in crazy shape at his age. Oh man, crazy. And the thing I love about Evander is he's one of those guys that he's a boxing head too, obviously, and he loves to talk. So I grew up watching Tyson, Holyfield, and those guys. So the first time he came into the gym, I was like starstruck. I was like, dude, there's Evander Holyfield. And so I sat down right next to him and just started chatting his head off. And, over the course of a couple years, we got to know each other, and he's told me all the stories. And one of the true highlights of my sports life, believe it or not, back in 2018, I entered an amateur tournament. So master amateurs. I needed that rush, man. I needed that feeling of like, I got to prepare for something, the anxiety of live bullets and going into the ring. And so I entered a masters boxing tournament in Atlanta, and ended up winning both of my fights and got a little ceremonial belt and stuff. Which is all cool. Which is crazy, right? Yeah. But one of the guys who was sitting ringside was Evander Holyfield. That's awesome. I remember I said to him after the fight, because his son Evan had worked my corner with our coach Bert, and I said to him afterwards, I said, man, I grew up watching your fights. I mean, I remember it from the cruiserweight days all the way, to the very end. And he was always a small heavyweight. He was. And but I said to him, one thing I never, ever dreamed would happen after growing up watching all these Evander Holyfield fights, that Evander Holyfield would watch one of my fights. That's pretty awesome. So it was a full circle moment for me, man. It was incredible. I want to talk about one little topic, and then I want to just talk about what you're doing a bit more. Let's talk about what you said. You had 7 concussions, and this is something with obviously the movie Concussion coming out a few years back. Was it 4 or 5 years with Will Smith? And when you
hear all the discussions now of athletes committing suicide or just or getting so depressed and losing family, and just there's so much controversy around the whole concussion stuff, but at the same time there's a lot of hush around it still. Where's your mindset with that? Like, do you believe there's enough attention to it yet, or is it something where the sport is always going to push it back because it's a barbaric sport, and it is what it is, and people do it on their own understanding and they love it? Where's your mindset with that?
So I think a number of places. So I do think the discussion has been elevated to the place where it deserves to be. Okay. Right. There's a big focus on concussions, and what's crazy is more so at the junior level, so to speak. And what I mean by that is in the Pee Wee leagues and the Pop Warners and junior high and high school football, there's a big push for safety around head trauma and traumatic brain injury, which I think is really where that focus should be. 100%. When you're younger, 100%. You're not as well formed. You're much more susceptible to traumatic brain injury that has lifelong consequences. Yeah. I think as you get into college and certainly into the pros, to the point that you made, we accept that. We accept that reality in football and hockey and soccer. Yeah. Certainly. Oh, so boxing.
It's crazy. It's crazy that I was reading a stat, the amount of concussions in soccer.
Unbelievable.
It's crazy, crazy.
Yeah.
It's more, they say it's more than NFL.
Yeah. Yep. And when you get up to those higher levels, that's something that you accept as a part of the reality. And I think that in years past, the NFL, this is one of the things they talked about in that concussion movie. And the NFL just didn't want to talk about it, right? Yeah, they didn't want any spotlight on that because their business is high flying, violent, big collisions. That's what brings the crowd to their feet. Yeah. And probably in the last 6-7 years, maybe 8 years, the league has started to, put that into proper focus, right? The protocol on the sidelines, if a guy gets dinged, the protocol to allow that person to go back into the game is much better than it was when I played. Yeah. Now, if you get a concussion, you're going to be out a minimum of 2 weeks for sure. Every concussion that I had in college and the pros, I was right back on the field the next week. As long as I could, as long as my eyes weren't crossed and I wasn't stuttering my words, they were like, "You're good to go. Get back out there." And so I think for a long time.
Let me ask you a question. Sorry, before you finish that, have any of those come back to bite you? Like, do you ever have headache? Like, is that something that you've dealt with and you're good with now?
So one of the things the league does is every 2 years, I get myself and other former players get a full brain, and they call it a brain and body scan, right? And so we go to a Cleveland clinic, in Miami or Vegas or a couple different locations, and get a full cognitive evaluation and full body blood work and the whole deal. And so I say that to answer your question by from a cognitive standpoint, all of those tests and everything, I passed those with flying colors. I've got daily headaches, neck and back pain, certainly have my moments of, forget where my car keys are or whatever, right? I have some of those signs that they talk about, like with CTE, in terms of irritability and mood swings. Now, understand this. How much of that is just normal for a 44-year-old guy? That's the question.
I'm 45, and as you were talking about losing your keys and stuff, like I can't even think how many times I leave my wallet at home. I'm driving, I go to the gas station to put money, and I'm like, "Fuck, where's my wallet? It's at home." It's in my pouch.
So, yep. So when I go into one of these appointments and a doctor says, "Any forgetfulness?" I'm like, "Well, compared to what? Like, what's the standard or what's the mean?" Because, do I walk into a room and go like, "Shit, why did I come in here?" Or do I pick up my phone sometimes and go like, "I don't remember what I was going to do," all the time? Do I get to the gym and forgot my headphones? Absolutely. So I don't know what's normal and what's 100%. But at the end of the day, I feel really good. My body, if I go try to run a couple pickup games of basketball with my nephews, I get 4 or 5 games in. The next day, I can barely walk. My feet and ankles and knees are closed.
Yeah, but that has a lot to do with age as well, too, right? I mean, I stay very active, and I'm exactly in the same boat as you, right? So, just one last thing with that, and I love that you brought this up, is that's the scary aspect of a lot of high school, college level athletes that are not going to make it to NFL. They're not going to get drafted, and they are getting probably as many, if not more, concussions at that level. Because you are still, especially in the college level, you're dealing with kids that are 6'6", 300-pound beasts already in college, smashing you, running at you, super athletes running at you full speed. That is where I think the conversation, just like you said, needs to be. The college, the high school, because there's so many kids that are finishing at that level, college, high school. They're never going to play football again. And now they're going to suffer for the rest of their lives with the headaches, with the concussions, all that stuff. So that I do agree. That's where I think a lot of attention has to be pushed towards. And I think is still not there. Even here, hockey, I mean, the hockey or any essentially contact sport, you need to really, really start from a very young age and really educate people. And if they decide to make their own decisions, at least they're educated and understand the circumstances that could come with it. So I appreciate that.
Yes.
So business-wise now, you wrote a book. You have a podcast?
I have a live stream. It's been inactive. I have a show called Be a Pro series.
Okay.
And I when I started writing the book and started doing more one-on-one private coaching, I kind of put that on the back burner. So I'm not as active in that, honestly, maybe as I should be. And I don't know what that standard of should, what that is, but so I don't do a lot of that. I enjoy it. I like being on other people's podcasts, but
it's a great branding aspect, right? And sure. And all this is a form. Like I've been a guest on 100 plus shows. I've recorded 100 and I think you're 188, 189 episodes in 2.5 years. Awesome. And it's just a networking. To me, it's such a great networking tool. It's great content. You're meeting incredible people. You build. Like I've said, Brad Johnson, like there's athletes, Brett Boom, baseball player. Like I talk to all the time. Like you, Shane Hillebrand, I'm probably going to start a podcast with him, All-Star, MLB All-Star. Like you build relationships with people, and that's all it is. It's such an incredible tool for networking, right? So I mean, I think that's the most important aspect of any form of podcast is networking, the branding aspect of it. So yeah. So your book, start to end. How long did it take you to put that together?
8 months.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I had a lot of those stories that are in the book were essentially already written because I use those as vignettes in different speaking engagements. And so there was a lot of those I was able to just plug them in and tweak them a little bit. Yeah. But the hardest part of the book writing process, which you understand, was once it was done, right? And I air quote that because once I said, okay, it's done, and then you hand it over to your editor, you realize it's nowhere close to being done. It was like, the lady that did my editing just tore it apart, man.
Yeah, I had the exact same thing. Thing. Actually, I took about 6 months. The first book, which is called Entrepreneurial Dad, at the back there, and it took about 6 months to write it, and then the editing process was another 4.5 months almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the most frustrating part because, you have to go back and add more here. Or this needs to be more fleshed out. Or this,
it's just the way we're thinking about our mindset of how it should be presented, but they understand of how people read it. It's a different mindset, right? So absolutely, a lot of stuff she'd be like, read this. And she's like, and then she'd turn around and give me a couple of days. Okay, now I want you to read it to yourself. And then I'm like, oh, fuck, that doesn't make sense. Okay.
Doesn't make sense. Yep.
And you're starting it over again. And all that. This has been awesome, bro. Is anything you want to leave with our audience?
No, man, I appreciate the opportunity so much to be on. And, obviously, if anybody's interested in the book, you can get it on Amazon or beaprobook.com.
And the book is called Be a Pro.
Book is called Be a Pro.
Yeah, we'll put it on all the show links and all that stuff like that for our guests.
Yeah, and just essentially the book is kind of what I talked about at the beginning. It's the mindset of an athlete, of an elite level athlete, from my perspective, both my own and people that I played with, and essentially how you can apply that to your life or your business to hit some of your personal goals, improve your business, increase your sales, all those type of things. It's those habits, practices, and principles, how you can apply them and get the result that you're looking for. And then, the bigger part of my business and what I truly love to do is the speaking aspect. So I get to do workshops and seminars and keynotes with different companies. And that's, Jeff, I had a guy ask me one time, what's one word I would use to describe myself? Typical question. And I said, fortunate. And he said, I like that. But he said, I was looking for something like dedicated or determined or whatever. And I said, no, fortunate. And the reason why I say that is because I got to live a childhood dream, right? I got to play in the freaking NFL, which is like
insane.
Just a dream, right? How fortunate do you have to be? So many, you talk about luck, so many things happened for me and went my way. And then now what I get to do for a living is I get to go out and speak to people and use my experiences and the things I learned to help them achieve a goal or achieve a dream and add value to their life. And I get paid to do it. And I can't believe they pay me to do it. Right. And you should probably cut that part out because people will start asking me to do it for free. But
I was about to say that too.
Yeah. But I just love what I do so much. And what I really love is the speaking, the trainings and the workshops and the private coaching. And so I say all that to say, if any of your listeners would like some more information on potentially bringing me in for workshop, seminar, or some private one-on-one coaching, I'd love to have that conversation. Best way to get me is just jimmy@jimmyfarris.com. That's my business email. And you can find me on all social media, just @JimmyFarris.
And the website is jimmyfarris.com.
Website's jimmyfarris.com. And I'd love to have those conversations, even if maybe we're not a fit, maybe we are, but I love what I do truly so much. I'm so thankful and fortunate that I found a second love, a second purpose and meaning. And I want to share it with people. And so if you want to have any of those conversations with me, I'd love to do it.
Appreciate it, buddy. This has been awesome. And we'll put everything on our show notes, and I'm sure we'll have you on again and hopefully continue our relationship and see what happens with that as well. So thank you so much. And have a day, buddy.
Absolutely, Jeff. Thanks so much.
Thank you.